Good morning, all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. This is Rediscovering the Federation with your hosts, Josh Pritchett, head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group, and my partner in crime, Mr. Chris Babone.
How you doing, Josh?
Morning, Chris. Yeah, so the final episode of Discovery, here we are. Yep. That was the thing, wasn't it?
I'll say this. I'm going to acknowledge for a moment that there was a Star Trek Enterprise. They should be sending them a fruit basket because this will now come down as the worst finale of a Star Trek series.
Oh gosh, yeah. I do have to say that as much as I did enjoy Enterprise, I did not enjoy the fact that the final episode turned out to be Riker and Troy watching the whole thing on a holodeck. That left something to be desired. That was a thing too, but
these last 15 minutes, Josh, I was expecting Riker to step out saying, "Hey, I'm your personal chef."
Yeah, he catered Saru and Talar's wedding. I mean, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I kept on yelling at the screen, holodeck off, and it would not turn off.
Chris, you want to know something? I routinely yell, holodeck off or Arch at work every day.
Doesn't work.
No, it never works. It doesn't.
But if there's one time I wanted it to work, it was this time watching this.
Yes. Okay.
You know what? I need to put an Apple AirTag on my remote because I desperately was looking for the remote to turn this off and I couldn't find it.
Yeah. Well, there were some things I did like about the episode. There were some things that were just pretty predictable. But I think before we really get into those things and feel like how we feel like, the legacy, what is the legacy of Discovery and how it ranks in this finale, ranked in amongst the finales of other Star Trek shows, I think we should go ahead and do our recap. So one last time, old friend, let's fly. Okay, so our episode picks up right where the penultimate episode left off, where Michael follows Maul into the porthole, which got launched out into space from the Breen shuttle bay. Everybody else all the other members of our crew managed to get back to Discovery. But now we are faced with a huge problem. More Breen ships are on the way to lay claim to Locke's remains and also the Progenitor's technology, which could spell doom for the Federation and the galaxy at large. Discovery has to keep the Breen contained while Michael secures the Progenitor's technology. Meanwhile, Saru goes on a mission to try to prevent the rival Primarch from arriving and trying to take the Progenitor technology for herself. So Michael is in this pocket universe where apparently the Progenitors developed their technology, and also where the Allied scientists went 800 years earlier to research the Progenitors. And she discovers these doorways into various worlds that the Progenitors very likely used to seed the galaxy with new life forms. In other words, us, humans, Vulcans, Klingons, Andorians, etc. Michael ends up on a world that is in constant storms and is attacked by a Breen, but manages to kill the Breen by kicking it into the storm before launching herself back into the portal. And then eventually she finds Maul, and of course a fight ensues. And after she subdues Maul, she convinces her to them that they need to work together to find the progenitor's technology, and she will help Maul use it to bring Locke back from the dead. Meanwhile, Raynor, realizing that they only have 60 minutes to retrieve Burnham and Maul and secure the portal before the other Primarch arrives, basically he launches into a mission-oriented plan to try to secure everything. Unfortunately, the black holes are very unstable, and the Brain have now launched fighters, so they have to fight those off. And so Book and Colbert volunteer to take a shuttle to try to capture the portal before it drifts into the black holes, and then try to get Michael back. Chris.
So we have a lot going on, and inside the portal, the team up of Locke and Burnham lead them to what Burnham identifies as negative space, and they sort of follow the correct yellow brick road until they find a device that is sort of in the middle of a field of flowers, if you may. It's all very psychedelic. It's like if there had been a Star Trek V, it's probably what they wanted to do in Star Trek V if they had had the right technology. And so they come upon a pile of rocks, and Burnham immediately says, well, that's because one of the scientists died. And they come upon a piece of technology that requires them to interact with it. And it's basically a puzzle. And Burnham remembers what she was told about making the shape that will make a shape. And that's all that Locke needs to hear, and she knocks her out and then proceeds to try to form the shape herself. And I was looking at it and I was like, I know what that shape's going to be. And I think we all probably did, except her, because he gets it wrong. And then all of a sudden she starts to apparently getting fried by the device. Meanwhile, the body of Maul is out to the side because it's revealed that she's carrying it with her in the portable transporter Buffler. And so she activates it wrongly, and then everything starts to go crazy, even more crazy than it is now, because it's a changing landscape. It's very, very psychedelic around them. Meanwhile, outside, you have Discovery trying to fend off all the fighters, while at the same time they know that Primarch Tahal is on her way. And in what is one of the oldest tricks, I think, in the book, they say there's a gaseous cloud nearby. And so someone says, hey, let's fly through that gaseous cloud. And then as we are coming out ahead of them and they're all in the gaseous cloud, let's ignite it. Which, again, is the oldest trick in the book, 800 years in advance. I mean, does Breen War School not teach this trick of like, hey, let's not all go into the gaseous ignitable cloud? Maybe some of us will go around the cloud, catch them off at the pass, but no. So they all go into the cloud, and then they're like, great, they fell for the oldest trick in the book. Now let's, as soon as we get out, let's ignite it with a photon torpedo. They do. No more fighter ships. Holding to the side the fact that, how did they were able to launch them to begin with? Because we thought they had messed up in the previous episode, their shuttle bay, but what else? Meanwhile, Colbert and Book are trying to make contact with Burnham at the edge of the entrance to the portal, and because it's been activated, it's causing all kinds of interference. They can't make contact, but at the same time, the radiation among them outside is spiking, and so they don't have very long. And Colbert's been kind of reminiscent about what does this all mean, the great state of things. And meanwhile, again, lots of stuff going on. And in the meanwhile of that, Action Saru comes into play, because in his tiny little shuttle that has been stripped of any possible armaments that can't be seen as a threat, but accompanied by Lieutenant Non, he intercepts Primarch Tahal with 3 huge ships. And he's like, well, I'm here to speak to you. I want to offer you a deal. And so Tahal listens, and he's like, well, I want to offer you a trade with the Federation through this sector of space. And Tahal's like, why would I need that? No, thank you. And then he's like, okay, I know what's going on here. He contacts her again and says, listen, you just told me everything I needed to know. Everyone's been talking about how you have a secret base, and it's got to be there because otherwise you'd say yes to this trade route. And so I've been around there, and so I have all these interactions with all these species who don't really like you, and they are preparing on my command to hit your secret base while you're out here. And so she's like, "You're bluffing," and he's like, "I'm not bluffing. Look at me in the eyes." And she says like, "You're insane." And then she like appears to leave, but Saru and Nan like leave a ship. They cloak and they discover and they refer back to Federation headquarters that okay, she did leave, but she left a shuttle, and so the shuttle is going over there to see like what the heck is happening. Meanwhile, Burnham sort of recovers from like being knocked out by Maul. See that Maul is getting like herself electrocuted somehow, and like yanks her out of the table. And then it's like, well, everything's going crazy here. I'm going to try and make the correct shape. And of course he does. And then someone appears and it's like you're one of the progenitors. And the progenitor says like, yes and no, I'm the last one. I've been waiting for someone like you. But turns out that we didn't build this. Like we just found it ourselves. So we don't know who built this. So we are the progenitors 2.0. And she says like, Michael, like I'm here to teach you how to use this because I can only teach you, no one else apparently, you. And that's going to take some time. And then she's like, well, I don't think we have this time because everything's going crazy around us. And she's like, oh, the black holes around us, that's just the machine is powering up to do what it needs to do. Because of course it does need a tremendous amount of power. And Mike's like, yeah, maybe we could do something different here. And they sort of reach an agreement that Michael will, not use the progenitor's tech at this time. And she asks her, like, straight up, it's like, well, can I use this to bring up this individual that we have, like, who's dead right next to me, and outside their negative space? And she says, well, it could make a copy and I can bring something back, but the essence of who the person was is not going to be there. Like, this is going to be the person, but there's going to be nothing in there. So, slight discourse about body and soul there. And she says, well, okay, let's just like, can we turn the device off? And meanwhile, everyone else is getting there, like Saru and Lan, the shuttle from the Breen that they're following. Discovery's already there. The Dreadnought's already there. So it's like, party time in between the two black holes. Joss, you want to take us away?
Yeah. So Michael and Maul get back to Book and Culbert's shuttle. They haul the portal back into Discovery's shuttle bay. Meanwhile, though, Raynor comes up with a plan, but it has to, you have to run it by, of course, Stamets and Adira and Tilly. Can we use the spore drive to send the Brain Dreadnought somewhere else? And at first they're like, no, that's special. Well, in theory, if we separate the saucer section and we put the drive section on the other end, and then we generate the spore drive field around it, we could send it somewhere. Where do you want us to send it? Raynor, I think, is tempted to say, send him straight to hell, i.e. the black hole. Then he says, galactic barrier. It'll take him about 20 years to get back, but that's more than they gave my family. Good on him for showing some growth there. But in the meantime, they initiate the plan and they launch the Brain ship to the far side of the galaxy, have a nice 20 years trying to get back to the Brain Confederacy. Burnham then calls a meeting with Saru, Raynor, Stamets, Adira, and Book to tell him her decision on the progenitor's technology. That it is too dangerous. They don't need it because they already have infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So it is best to shoot the technology into the black hole. So even though Stamets doesn't want to do it, he rationalizes that, yeah, it's probably too dangerous. And, there's so much else out there that he can learn from and, other great discoveries to make. So they launch it off in there. And then Discovery returns to Starfleet headquarters. Burnham goes into Kovich's office. And Kovich says, "You have been one of the most fascinating and frustrating people I've ever met." And Burnham is looking around his office, and she sees a bottle of Chateau Picard, Geordi's old visor, and Captain Sisko's baseball. And she says, "Sir, Kovich is just a code name, isn't it? Who are you really?" And Kovich says, "My real name, Captain, is a bit of a red directive itself." And she says, "Well, I've gotten kind of used to those, so Captain Michael Burnham, USS Discovery." She holds out her hand. Kovich takes her hand and says, "Agent Daniels, USS Enterprise," among other things. For those you don't remember, Agent Daniels was the name of the temporal affairs agent that was a recurring character in the first 3 seasons of, first all 4 seasons of Star Trek Enterprise. And apparently he has been around a lot for a long time now. So that is really fascinating. We'll talk more about that later. So we cut
But
ahead
that's where
to
it ended, right?
Hmm?
There's no more thing. Oh wait, no, there's still one more.
Yeah. So we cut ahead a few months to the wedding of President Talar and Ambassador / Admiral Saru. Very lovely affair. And of course, it's catered by William Riker because this whole thing's been a holodeck all along. No, I'm just kidding about that part. I wish. But, and then Michael and, first let me say this. Tilly is talking to Raynor and Michael about creating a mentorship program at Starfleet Academy, which they think is a great idea, although Raynor asks, "Did you just call me grumpy?" And then Michael goes and has a walk with Book to talk about their future. Book mentioned something about Maul had a baby, so I guess she was pregnant with Maul's kid all along. We didn't know it. And then we cut ahead another several decades.
No, that's it. Stop. We don't. Stop. It ended
Okay,
there,
can I
right?
just mention that Michael takes Discovery with the Zora, and they take Discovery to a hidden region of space to tie back in with the short Trek episode we saw so many years ago. Can we just mention that? I won't go into anything else.
I think there's FTC regulations that prohibit us from, saying something so terrible as those last 15 minutes were. But okay, go ahead.
All right, so we find out that Michael and Book had a son. The son is now a captain in Starfleet, and she's going to take Discovery for one last time out to the deep space where it will remain hidden until it is needed again, which, of course, those of you who remember the Short Treks episode from several years ago, it kind of comes full circle, and she has one more heartfelt vision of seeing her former crew together on the bridge, and she says, "One last time, let's fly." And that brings us to the end of the Adventures of Star Trek Discovery, a show which I felt like had good moments, but was a show that suffered a lot of difficulty that was sort of beyond its control. And now, old friend, I think we should talk a little bit about what was good, bad, and Gorn about this, and also maybe it's, how this finale ranks with other Star Trek finales, and also what its legacy will be going forward. So what do you think was good about this episode?
How much time do I have to think about this?
Well, I can give you 10 seconds.
That a bad season ended. Okay, that's my good about it.
Okay. All right, look, I won't lie to you. I liked Rainer a lot. Um, I thought special effects were phenomenal in many scenes in this finale. I love the idea about using the spore drive to send the brain dreadnought into another part of the galaxy. I thought that was really cool. I liked the fact that Book planted the world root and it clearly grew a new world tree, whatever planet it was that they ended up on, that he and Michael ended up on. That was nice. And I liked the fact that Kovich turned out to be Agent Daniels and that it was temporal. It was the Office of Temporal Affairs and not Section 31. So that made me very happy. Because unlike you, I'm a little bit more sympathetic, I think, to Enterprise. But okay. Obviously, we got a lot of stuff we were not so happy about. I will just say that I thought the plot was somewhat predictable. I mean, the whole thing was, they were cribbing a lot of ideas from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, so it was pretty obvious that Maul was going to choose poorly. And Michael was obviously going to get it right. So, one last good thing I will say that I thought that they filmed the wedding of Saru and Talar very nicely, very well done. Chris, you want to go ahead and start us off on the bad stuff?
Oh boy. How much?
Oh boy.
Let me ask our producer how much time we have here.
We have 30 minutes.
Okay, may not be enough. So let me ask you a question, Josh.
Okay.
What can you tell me of the bridge crew? What can you tell me about Reese?
I think that he liked the Constitution class design, but yeah, you're right. We
don't know anything.
Yeah.
The only thing we know about the bridge crew was what Raynor got in his tell me about yourself in 2 minutes or less. Oh no, sorry, 50 words or less. And that is the crux of this whole season, and perhaps this series, since they went into the future, is that this became the Burnham Book and Associates show. It stopped being Star Trek Discovery. One of the strong points of The Next Generation, of Deep Space Nine, is that we got to know the core of the bridge crew. Granted, we were dealing with 22 episode seasons back then, but even if you look at Star Trek Strange New Worlds right now, we know more about and they have 10 episodes each and only 2 seasons. We know more about the backgrounds of Nurse Chapel, Dr. Mabenga, of all of the bridge crew, more than we discovered in all of Discovery. That final piece of them jumping around like happy hobbits without saying anything sums up nicely how empty the background story is of all of them. Because apparently Michelle Piller and the other writers felt that we needed to know much, much, much more about Book, Burnham, and even the cat than the people serving on the bridge. And this season, we had less to nothing about the backgrounds of everyone. And it's such a huge disappointment because this season especially was just carte blanche to explore what is happening in the Federation. I mean, what have we had so far? We had them going to the future, which I thought was very bold. I give them props for that. And I will say that I think one of the legacies of Discovery will be, okay, not only did they help bring Star Trek back after a 20-year absence, but it was pretty bold to go into the future, give us new technology, something that Star Trek has been associated with. Okay, I give them a lot of prep for that, a lot of credit for that. But then after that, we have, okay, the dilithium crisis sort of makes sense. Okay, story-wise, it worked. Okay, fine. Then it was the big V'ger all-season moment of this big cloud that is tearing up the Federation and anything goes around in it. Okay, we've been here before, but all right. This season was the big opportunity to show us, what happened with some of the what is happening with some of the world building. Like, let me throw something out there for you, Josh, and we'll talk about this more in the Gorn. What if they had Mal and Locke as political refugees from the Breen, and then you have the counterbalance of like, is the Federation built up enough at this point to be able to withstand pushes from the Breen Imperium if they wanted them back? And how would that conflict look like? How would worlds align themselves? Just world building. Not that, okay, there are two couriers and now we're just taking a page out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Lazy writing. And they really just made this into, they Kirkified it. It all of a sudden became all about Soneca Martin Green's character and not about the other people on the ship. And this is why I'm calling it Burnham, Book, and Associates, because the others didn't matter as much anymore. We got bit and token appearances by Tig Notaro's character. So he probably filmed that in a day. I mean, it was such a huge letdown. Lazy writing, focused too much on Captain Burnham. This is not the final season. Even if they didn't know this was the final season, okay, what they gave us was so much less than what my expectations were, and probably of a lot of people out there. I mean, this was just the Book and Burnham and Associates show, and it should have been so much more.
Yeah. If we're just going to go ahead and combine all this, I think that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Star Trek Discovery for bringing Star Trek back to television. Okay. Granted, though, it should have been on CBS proper, not streaming. The whole purpose of making it a streaming show was because Les Moonves wanted people to buy into this streaming service he started. Okay. And nobody had even heard of it. Nobody even knew about, unless you were watching CBS a lot, you didn't know about All Access until, if you were a Star Trek fan, you heard about Discovery, you were going to have to subscribe to this new streaming service. Okay. You didn't have the option to watch it on CBS. Okay. But it was clearly a show that had its flaws. First season, I felt like, okay, somebody thought this show needed to be more like Battlestar Galactica in the way it was filmed, the look of it, even the fact they had even brought in actors who had been on Battlestar previously. And I'm not knocking Battlestar. It was a fine show, but it was not, it should have its own separate identity that is not Star Trek, okay? Each sci-fi franchise, I've said for years, needs to have a separate identity, okay? Also, we have to deal with the fact that, Brian Piller left the show midway through season 1 for whatever reason. People were not happy with the way that various characters looked like the Klingons. It was a bold attempt. It was a bold idea, and I agree with you that they had a lot of bold things, like saying Spock had an adopted human sister, but they had become estranged. Okay. And I think really season 2 and 3 were their best years. Okay. I do feel like we saw more of these other characters in various episodes, but then it was like, okay, you got less and less of this and more of Michael and Book and some of the associate characters. And even then, I felt like Tilly got less and less to do. And I felt like Adira got less and less to do. And I felt like Stamets and Colbert got less and less to do. And I'm not saying that, I don't know if this was something Sonequa said. She wanted more. I'm not saying that. Maybe it was the writers decided they were going to focus everything on her. Okay. Can't do anything about that. But you're right. That it was lazy writing. As far as, this individual episode, it was predictable. I thought there were some well-filmed fight scenes, but I mean, they didn't serve to further the story. I felt like these last 2 seasons were more about these big, epic, overarching stories that could have been told in 1 or 2 episodes. I mean, like, yeah, you could have used the monster cloud thing as a thing that incentivized Earth to come back into the Federation. Yeah, but you could have told that in 2 episodes, and you could have used the rest of the season to tell more about doing individual episodes, because Star Trek doesn't need to have these big. I mean, yeah, you had the Dominion War in the last 2.5 seasons of Deep Space Nine, but that wasn't always the main focus of every episode. You still had the time to do, episodes about, like, let's go to the old holodeck where the crew of DS9 plays a Vulcan crew in a game of baseball. Okay. Or, what was Quark getting up to on this particular week, or what was going on here? You still had room for character growth and development in those things. And there was none of that in the last 2 seasons. And that was a real downer for me, because I wanted to love Discovery. And at best, I could just say I liked it, and that I felt like the 2 seasons that I mentioned, 2 and 3, were their best ones. I know David Bean Cooley, the NPR television critic, talked about this show on Friday about the finale, and he said that he liked the first season because it was a radical reimagining of Star Trek. Okay, he's welcome to his own opinion on that one. I disagree with him, but I am taking into account that, yeah, Discovery was a show that had a difficult birth, but part of its legacy is also Picard, Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, Prodigy, and soon Academy and Section 31. So, it has brought Star Trek forward into a new generation of fans that I've gotten to see in shows like at cons like GalaxyCon and DiversityCon. And I'm really happy that younger people are now discovering Star Trek because of Discovery. So for that, we owe them a great sense of gratitude, I think. But at the same time, we are dealing with the fact that Discovery is not the best of the Star Trek shows.
If you measure finales, you're absolutely right. You have a choice when you hear that your show is canceled. Like, you can just leave it there as is and hope that you get some wrap-up TV movie, whatever, or just leave it there. The original series, they ended it in that one last episode. Then they got movies out of it with the story continued, right? Don't do something just because you feel you need to do something. These final 15 minutes, as we understand it, they were told, okay, you're canceled, and you get 15 minutes to kind of wrap things up. Those 15 minutes were terrible. I mean, they were so bad. Again, lazy writing. They fell back on the old thing of, like, let's just age the characters. I mean, like, why? So we can see that 800 years in the future, nepotism still is a thing as Burnham's son becomes a captain. And then you wrap it up by totally, excuse my French here, shitting on one of the basic course of Star Trek, which is respecting life where you discover it, because Zora is a life form. And so without any explanation whatsoever, you're just going to send her to some deep reaches of space, because in some short trek, which hadn't, when they made it, they hadn't really thought of, okay, what our finale is going to be. Like, okay, let's just, we need to explain this because we had a Star Trek short trek. So now we got to send this unique life form 800 or 1,000 years into the future where no one's going to see her. Like, I know you helped us a lot, Zora. That was great. Okay, bye now. No, I mean, if not for anything else, you had different timelines. It would have been perfectly acceptable to say, okay, that Star Trek moment when you saw her way in the future, that was because the Breen destroyed the Federation. We fixed that now. It's a different timeline. We all know about timelines. If you are still fearful of the information that is held on the ship, well, guess what? There's a library now, which is an archive of information. Wouldn't it make more sense, if you wanted to decommission her and you can't destroy her, to have her either download herself into the library, or just have her always be next to the library? Because as we've seen, they do need some form of way to defend themselves. I mean, just park her permanently around the library, or we saw in Picard there was, at least at one time, 800 years ago, a Starfleet museum. Why not let her go to the Starfleet museum there? I mean, you're basically taking a life form and just saying, okay, just for no reason that we're going to tell you, just go way out there and be lost for 800 years, despite the fact that you numerous times helped save this crew and myself. Thanks, bye-bye. Like,
Yeah.
no, that was totally against everything that Star Trek stands for. So I really didn't like that. And part of what I saw in the series, and especially this episode, is that the need to answer things. Guess what? I'm okay with not knowing things. Okay, I am very okay with not knowing who Kovic was. I mean, you could have told me he was a famous film director from the 21st century. Hey, I would have liked that. I'm fine. Or just don't tell me at all. I like the mystery. Star Trek has a history of not answering questions like, do we know if Worf's brother ever got his memory back? Do we know why Worf stopped being an ambassador to the Federation? Do we know if Ensign Kim ever rose above the rank of ensign? We do not. And you know what? It's fine. Not every question needs to be answered. And this answered all the wrong questions. And also, that little homage again, where they're dancing and happy all around. Notice that no one is actually talking. That's because pay scale is different. So if they have to bring them back for an extra 15 minutes, they got away with paying them far less by not having them talk than by having them say a single word, because the moment you say a single word, your pay scale goes right up. So you weren't willing to even invest enough to give us a dignified final 15 minutes. And, you know, caking actors in, makeup never works, okay? It would have been fine if you just showed us, okay, they're still out there continuing their adventures. It worked for the original series. It would have worked for this too.
Yeah. I just want to make note of a couple things our host suggested. I mean, our producer suggested that maybe the actors in the ensemble started moving on to new projects since the show was about to end, and also focusing on fewer characters probably was an asset to the budget. Well, I mean, considering all the news I keep following about Paramount and CBS and everything about money troubles, maybe that was the decision. Maybe this was, focusing more on Burnham, save the money on,
But if
I mean, Seth Meyers makes all these jokes about letting his assistant Wally talk, because if Wally gets to talk during an episode, they have to pay him more. I'm sure that that's in humor, but I'm sure there's some truth to that humor.
There probably is, but I mean, they're still spending that money on something. In this case, it was special effects, but obviously they didn't watch The Phantom Menace in Star Wars, because otherwise they would realize that you can have great special effects, but unless you have strong acting and a strong story, it's all for naught.
Yeah, well, the producers, I mean, the people in the front office don't really care about that part. They just care about, hey, do we get enough money to buy a new sports car this month, or do we get to pay for our house in Malibu? I mean,
is it that, or how much is it the lead? Like, this is a hypothetical I'm tossing out there, but if you look at Strange New Worlds, it really, you are left with the impression that Anson Mount is really pushing for, like, okay, we're an ensemble. And that means everyone has a bit of story focused on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And how much did we have the lead in this show pushing for focus on other characters rather than just herself? And
I mean, there were certainly, we've heard the stories about how William Shatner would want to take lines away from George Takei or Walter Koenig or Jimmy Doohan and keep them for himself.
Yes.
Whereas Avery Brooks would come in and look at a script and say, yeah, I know you want Cisco to jump in the Jeffries tube and fix this, but shouldn't O'Brien be doing that? He's the engineer, and he would redistribute things to his cast members so that everybody had more to do. I mean, he was the lead. He was the main hero. And I think, you had a different culture and different people running Star Trek in those days. So maybe he could get away with that. Our producer just pointed out it's all about bottom line profits. Well, yeah.
Yes, but how much does the lead of the show have an influence? And I think the lead of the show, as we've seen with Anson Mount, does have a big influence.
Yeah, and I mean, I mean, yes, Sonequa has since season 3 been listed as executive producer. So, I don't want to, but I don't, the thing is, I'm not willing to judge her because I don't know her. And I don't think anybody who worked on the show really wants to run out and sabotage and say that, oh, she was this and that. And she seems like, at least when you've seen her in interviews, she seems quite gracious. But then again,
actors.
Yeah, it can be actors. Yeah.
I guess time will tell. Just like it did with Avery Brooks, just like it did with Shatner, just like it did with Patrick Stewart. Time will tell.
Yeah.
What really happened.
Well, to be fair to Patrick, he's been, I think, a lot more forthright in his own faults and that things he wished he'd done differently. And it seems like the TNG cast has a much stronger bond with each other, as does the DS9 and Voyager, and even the Enterprise crew seems to have a really good bond with each other. They're all still, at least talk to each other, but you can't get George Takei and Walter and William Shatner in a room together half the time. I mean,
no, you can't. I remember I was at an Awesome Con, and it was Takei and Shatner were there at the same time, but yet they would not acknowledge one another.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, somebody asked them why George didn't do his panel with Bill, and some people got on the guy's case, and clearly he's a fan who didn't know all the stories about how much of a jerk Bill could be to the rest of the cast.
But even with the concerns are expressing about like the leadership and the acting, but also let's not forget the writing was not good.
No. I mean, and we both have heard the stories about how bad it got in the writer's room when they got around to season 2, and how they actually had to fire 2 writers for physically assaulting the other writers. I mean, and there were times, like I've said, I felt like there was not a lot of people who really understood Star Trek that were working on the show. I mean,
I think part of my personal opinion, Joss, is that the reason why the writing was so weak was because they were too scared of like showing a vision of what the whole Federation looked like 800 years ago. Because obviously, as fans, there's different opinions. Like I can say the Klingons were all eaten by tribbles. Someone else can say, no, the Klingon Empire became pacifist monks. All of us have different opinions of what they think the vision was. And so perhaps they were just running scared of offending too many people by giving them what the vision is. So they tried to work around the edges and like, okay, you know what? We're not going to show you what Klingons are because we don't think there's universal agreement of what happened to the Klingons 800 years from now, or the Bajorans, or like the Cardassians. So instead of being brave and bold and going where no person's gone before, they were like, we're just going to like limp around the edges.
Well, yeah, there's that, and I think there's also the fact that they want to keep doing Star Trek in the 23rd, 24th, 25th centuries, and if you basically say this is where the Klingons are going to end up, all right, that doesn't give whoever's going to come next to write the stuff, it doesn't give them a lot of room because they're in this constraint. So, I think that's the one aggravating thing about going forward into the future 800 years is that, you got to write some interesting episodes, but at the same time, this is where Star Trek's going to end up. So we can't deviate from that. So, like if you want to do, say, the temporal war movie or something, okay, we know what's going to happen, that the Federation survives it. You lose the sting of drama with that.
Well, I mean, going along that thread, if, as we suspect, Tilly was going to end up on Star Trek Academy, because of that one throwaway line of, well, Tilly says he's the longest tenured member of the Academy. Now I know whatever happens, she's going to survive. Like, Timmy has fallen down a well, surrounded by hungry Gorn. That's okay. Send Tilly down there because he's going to live. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, it does kind of go back to like last season of Strange New Worlds is, I mean, Chris knows he's going to survive. He's accepted his destiny. So he doesn't mind taking the risk of trying to sneak out to the shuttle to get everybody off the planet. Because if they're with him, they are more likely to survive because he's going to survive so he can face his destiny. At least that's the theory. But, there's that. But I mean, even then, Strange New Worlds manages to write around that and still manages to create a compelling series.
Why do I like Strange New Worlds? Because Anson Mount isn't in every scene in every
right.
episode. Okay.
Yeah.
We see background and learn about the other bridge crew. They have opportunities to carry the show. Whereas here, it felt like I'm only going to bring you in Stamets as necessity rather than allow you to carry this. And, we had this discussion, Josh, before that, for example, it was a great opportunity to, instead of having Burnham in the library and like her spirituality pass or whatever, have it been Raynor, maybe Raynor and Tilly. I mean, it just seems one of the negatives of this season has been so little time for other characters. And I get it. It might be because it was delayed and other people were doing other things. But then you know what? Give some of the lower decks characters an opportunity to shine. Like, give Linus something to do rather than like being in an elevator and tell her you look good in red.
Right. I wanted to know more about Linus.
I mean,
because that was a complicated makeup job, and you're just going to have him down there just in the background saying a few lines. I mean, that's why Michael Dorn didn't want to come back for season 1 of Picard, because it was like he was only going to cut a couple of lines and he was going to be talking through the TV camera at Patrick Stewart. That he didn't want to do that. He wanted to actually interact with and act alongside Patrick again.
Give us more of Admiral Vance. I mean, give us more of the other characters. You did not need what ultimately we got. And, you can dress up the final episode with all the special effects, and the special effects were incredible. They were really, visually
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, a good storyline trumps special effects. And this was kind of hollow. I mean, the whole thing about, okay, we want to get Locke there. And then, sorry, no, can't revive him after all. I'm like,
right. No, I mean, and that went nowhere. And
it really did go nowhere really fast.
Yeah, I mean, and I almost would have liked the idea of like, okay, we try to, Maul brings Locke back, but Locke is like super zombie or something. I mean, that would have been at least something different, but. I kept joking about how Rick, how Michael Burnham, Sonequa came over from Walking Dead. I mean, does she still know how to make a headshot? But no, So I think as we bring it in, I think we spent more time talking on Discovery's legacy and what we think went wrong with it, and where we think it could have been better, and where we think what was good about it. I mean, I think, I don't want to say this was the worst, because there was so much about it to like, but they underutilized all their resources. They had all this, I think that Star Trek works better as an ensemble show. As much as I have fond memories of TOS, it's the movies I love the most because, they got more into beyond just Kirk and Spock and McCoy. They got into Sulu, Chekhov, Scotty, and Uhura more. And that's something that should never be forgotten about. And the same thing goes with Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, and Lower Decks, and Prodigy and Picard is focusing not just on the lead, but all the other characters. So I think that was one of the failures of Discovery right there.
Not everyone knows how to end something. Like J.J. Abrams doesn't know.
Oh God,
Dave Filoni,
he doesn't even know how to write a second act. Okay, so
Dave Filoni over in Star Wars, he knows how to like end a season. He knows how to close a series. Very good at it. You have people who know how to do it, and other people who get lost in it. The X-Files got lost in its own mythology. Chris Carter didn't know how to like bring that to a close. Ronald Moore, he didn't know how to close Battlestar Galactica. We had a 2-hour finale, great first hour. That second hour sucked. Anyone watching Battlestar Galactica finales, they only watch up until the end of the first hour, and that's it. By the way, Outlander, which is a show I love, its final season, run by Ron Moore, comes up starting November 22nd, 10 episodes. I'm afraid that, like, he's not going to know how to close that either. So I think this is an example of how you had too many cooks in the kitchen, and at the end, no one could agree on how to end it well. So they just went with, like, basically the equivalent of, like, whatever.
Yeah. And the thing is, to our viewers and anyone watching, we're not like other fans. We take no joy in beating up on Discovery. We don't want to. We wanted to love this show as much as we loved all the other Star Trek shows, but it just, there were so there were just so many things that opportunities they just missed.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, you know, they did good things. Like, hey, they made a black woman the lead character on a popular franchise show, which a lot of people don't want to take that risk doing. And good on them for doing that. Good on them for having more, you know, showing more diversity, having a gay couple.
A healthy relationship.
And a very healthy relationship, and them adopting a non-binary child, well, Adira was not a child. She was in her 20s, but adopting this person into their family unit and making them feel welcome cannot be underestimated, because this is a true representation of what we want to be as a society, is accepting and loving and tolerant and caring for one another. So kudos on them for that. They did. That was wonderful. It's just we take umbrage with the writing and not focusing more on all these other characters, and just, you know, whatever it was. But our producer just added the original Dexter series ended. I hated the last 2 seasons of Dexter. The miniseries with somewhat redeemed the ending of the original.
I mean,
we can talk about that on another show.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you're going to give me Stacey Abrams as a president of the Earth Federation, president of Earth, then if you know you've only got 15 minutes left, instead of giving us that, give us like 3 minutes with Holly Hunter saying, like, okay, this is maybe a couple years in the future, you know, going to introduce we're formally establishing a new academy, or expanding the academy or whatever, but we're going to introduce our new chancellor, which is like Holly Hunter's character. I mean, use the 15 minutes for that. Just give me 1 minute of that. I mean, it was rushed, ill-conceived, and a victim of the poor writing that has plagued it. I mean, in a real sense, Josh, there's a part of me that thinks that when they solved the dilithium crisis, right? Yeah. Maybe that's when they sort of ended it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, the Federation is back 800 years in the future. We've got dilithium. We're going to continue, like, in our adventures, leave it wide open. But even when they gave answers like, do you know what the pathway drive is?
Oh.
How do they solve this? So does that make it irrelevant that they have this planet full of dilithium? Because, we just discovered the pathway drive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, are they still going to use dilithium? And, you know, I'm going to say one other thing about the dilithium thing that drove me nuts is that, number one, dilithium is not the main power source. Dilithium, it just captures the matter-antimatter reaction, and that's how it powers the starships in the Star Trek universe. And also, if you go back to Star Trek 4, and this was mentioned in Star Trek Next Generation, they figured out how to reconstitute the dilithium crystals, so they could reuse. And maybe they're, you know, when all the other dilithium blew up, that made it harder to make more starships because they had less dilithium to work with. But either way, you know, I think there were times that they wanted, you know, whereas the first 2 seasons of Next Generation, they didn't have much drama. They stayed away from over drama. And this one, I think, had too much drama at times. But like I said, this was not about us we're not like we're not like other review shows. We didn't want to hate this show. We didn't want to bash it. We had just objections as we saw the writing. We're just two fans that love Star Trek and other sci-fi shows. And, there was a lot of good things to praise. I think the actors were good, but I think most of them were just underutilized. And,
they were very underutilized.
Yeah.
It was
now
an ensemble cast that never had quite the right opportunity to shine individually.
Yes, I totally agree. Now, as we prepare to bring this show into Space Dock one final time, of course, later this year we will be back for Strange New Worlds and for Lower Decks.
I thought our producer had said that he asked us to go like way somewhere far away and just wait to be recalled. I mean, like, as long as it takes. If it's hundreds of years, like
no, not going to happen.
Okay. That's right.
We're still right here.
Zara should have said, like, no, I am not going.
No, we are not. No. We will not be denied. We are not going to the furthest regions of the galaxy and just sit there until somebody calls us.
Yeah, no.
Not happening.
We're rebelling. We're telling our producer right now, we are rebelling, and we're going to actually come back. We're not taking this go away.
We will be back.
Yeah,
we will be back. But going forward, I think what do we hope for? What do we hope for? I mean, obviously we've got 2 more seasons we've got only 1 more season of Lower Decks, at least 2 or 3 more of Strange New Worlds. We've got Academy. We've got the Academy series. We've got the Section 31 movie. Legacy is up in the air. What do you think?
Well, Legacy could still happen with someone else. I mean, Vision Quest has got a strong producer in Terry Matala, someone who's going to do that show a good job. What do I want? I want an Academy that embraces world building for the Federation that we didn't see in Discovery. I want to be proven wrong that the Tribbles ate all the Klingons. I want something that shows us how the Federation is working 800 years in the future. That's what I want. I want Strange New Worlds to go 7 seasons in a movie, to quote Community. Although 5 seems to be the magic number, right? But I want it to go 7 in a movie. That's my battle call for Strange New Worlds. For I guess for Section 31, just do a movie, and I'm happy with that. What is my ultimate goal? My ultimate goal is to go back to Deep Space Nine, but I think we're going to need a very brave writer to do that.
And a willingness by the studios. And I mean, at this point, I want someone to make sure that Star Trek will be intact, whatever happens with this big sale with Sony.
God, I don't want Sony to own Star Trek. I really don't want that.
No. I mean, given how badly they've done the Spider-Man movies without Marvel involved. I mean, I know everybody's, what about the Spider-Verse movie? Yeah, what about them? That's a completely separate thing from the live action stuff. So that's a completely different office. They're not in charge of the live action stuff. So don't even talk about that. I mean, on their own, they butchered Spider-Man 3. They messed up the 2 Andy Garfield movies. They, some people like that. Madam Web, some people like the
Madam Web, both not good.
Morbius. Yeah. I mean, we don't even have time to get into those. I think I told you guys, hey, if Disney put a couple $1 billion and bought Star Trek, okay,
I'd be happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd bend the knee to the mouse instantly. Yeah. They would pretty much own me lock, stock, and barrel, because you've now got most all of my favorite sci-fi franchises right there in one place. So fine with me, just so as you get 100% of the license, so we don't have to go through, badly done Klingons and Andorians again. Just make it look good. And but in the meantime, what I'm kind of wondering about is, hey, could we do more with animation? I mean, Michael Dorn has had this idea for a Worf series for a long time. what if you could do an animation sort of like in the style of the Bad Batch or the Clone Wars, but do it with a Klingon show? And, I don't know if that would be less expensive or more expensive,
I
but
like the idea of. I think they did so well with Star Trek Lower Decks. I think this should not be one and done. They should really explore what series would Animation be. I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential for things out there, or something totally new. But I think Animation is a place for further expansion.
Yeah. And going forward, I'll just say this about Lower Decks. We are going to its last season. I would really, I know that's going to hurt a lot for us because that honestly has been, I would say, the strongest of the modern Trek shows. It's been, with Tawny Newsome, the great one, who will be writing Academy, by the way. So I have a lot of hope for Academy.
Ensign Beckett Mariner. I just want to say again, shout out to our friends at Farpoint that when they had her this year, as soon as he walked out, you heard the chant unsolicited of "Lower Decks, Lower Decks,
Lower Decks, Lower Decks." Yeah. So I think, I would not mind if the season of Lower Decks, I know we're talking Lower Decks and we're still on this, but I would really love it to tie into some of the events of the Romulan evacuation. Did the Cerritos help out with that? And it maybe Mariner end up becoming Worf's first officer on the Enterprise? And maybe that's why what happened to the Enterprise E wasn't Worf's fault. No, it was Boimler.
It was Boimler.
It has to be Boimler.
But
no.
But that is the beauty of Lower Decks, that they gave us totally new characters, and it worked.
It did, and it still sent love letters to everything that had gone before it, and it was nice to have guest appearances by people like James Cromwell and Nana Visitor and Armin Shimmerman and Robert Duncan McNeil, just to name a few, who just a lot of love for Star Trek right there. And so I think we've run a few minutes over as we bid a final fond farewell to the USS Discovery.
So Josh, where do you rank the finale?
Well, I'm going to have to rank it somewhere behind the finale of Enterprise.
Agreed.
But I'm willing to put it out ahead. Well, I've been going back and forth over this. I'm sorry, I keep scratching my nose, everybody. When they canceled the original series, they didn't know that was the final episode. I think they only knew a few days beforehand this was going to be it. They didn't give it a fond farewell. They just ended it. So, which of course left it open for the animated shows and then ultimately the 6 movies that followed it. I don't want to say it's the worst, but it's kind of, it didn't turn out.
I'll say it's the worst.
It was a child that had a lot of difficulties. We will love it for what it was, and we will remember the best parts about it. But, there are mistakes there that need to be learned.
Based only on finale, I give it the L. L. However you want to do it. There you go. Whatever. I give it the L for last. Yeah. Worth the finale slide. Enterprise, you are relieved. We have a new last one.
And to be fair, though, it does leave us with a legacy that did lead into, 4 new Star Trek TV shows, probably 5 and some other projects.
So I'm not
right. It will have our gratitude for that. And, I still would love to meet more of the cast members. I loved meeting Dr. Colbert last year at Shore Leave. I thought he was a real joy and a real gentleman to meet. I would love to meet more of the cast members and just say, hey, thank you for bringing Star Trek back to us. So,
I'm not disputing that. I'm just in terms of the finales, this is my last. Yeah. And now in terms of series, where do you rank it?
I don't want to say it was my least favorite. Like I said, there were a lot of problems there. It was written I've talked about this. It was written as a response to the fan film Axanar. It was written to try, in a cynical ploy, to try to get people to buy CBS All Access. It was butchered by the people behind the scenes, not by the actors. And I'm sure some of the writers gave it their best shot. So, but it does kind of come in last because, like you said, there were too many cooks in the kitchen and there was too many people trying to, give their own 2 cents when it wasn't necessary.
I think Enterprise is still acknowledging, only for the final minutes of the show, that there was an Enterprise, that Enterprise is last, but now Discovery is going to be next to last.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, I would still like to meet all the actors and express my gratitude for bringing Star Trek back. But that said, this was a show that had a lot of behind the scenes problems, and now it's finished. But we can build off of this and we can go forward. Hopefully, some way, we don't know if Disney's going to buy Star Trek. We don't know if Sony's going to buy Paramount. We don't know anything. We just have heard, we're just reporting what we saw in the news. We just know for sure that there will be an Academy series. There will be a Section 31 movie. There will be at least 2 more seasons of Strange New Worlds, and there will be 1 final season of Star Trek Lower Decks. I don't know about when or that Prodigies will finally get to Netflix. So all that's up in the air. But when we know something, we will be back here on the Movers and Shakers Network to tell you about it. And so now I think wrapping up, and now that we've brought Discovery to someplace, the far end of the universe, and letting it wait for whatever happens next. Chris, would you like to tell people how to get in touch, how to, reach you, or where you would like them to follow you?
I can be found at Verde Cosplay on Instagram, and in a few minutes, if anyone is in the Wheaton area, you can find me at the Taste of Wheaton.
Sounds delicious. I hope you have a great time there, my friend. You can find me at Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook, at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group, where if anybody's interested in joining, in June, we will be meeting at the Air and Space Museum to take pictures with the original model of the USS Enterprise from the original Star Trek series, along with various other things now that Air and Space has been rehabbed. So if you're interested. Also, you can see me in person at the Bigfoot Conference in Weir's Cave, Virginia in 2 weeks, where I will be selling copies of my work. And if anybody would like to see me there and come by and say hello and share your thoughts on anything Star Trek or Bigfoot or Doctor Who or whatever, I'll be there. So until then, I remain Josh Pritchett.
Peace and long life. See you in the fall.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for sharing your Sunday with us.